I think you sit at a desk and on the computer you do your work to buy trucks.
Yeah. Does that sound fun to you, or does that sound not so fun to you? You could be honest. If you don't, what do you think?
Kind of fun, kind of not fun. I don't know. Probably maybe I don't know. If I had a longer time to think about it, I could maybe you know.
Yeah. What do you think of any kind of job that you say, oh, that sounds interesting? Like, I know one time you told me that you think you like to be an engineer.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Is that something you think you like?
The job that sounds really fun is to be a baseball player.
Oh, well, yeah. I mean, who doesn't want to be a baseball player, right? That sounds so cool. Why does being a baseball player sound like a good job?
Because baseball's fun. It's my favorite sport.
Yeah?
Played it since I was 4.
Right. So you've been playing it for a whole 2.5 years, huh?
Yeah.
That's a long time, isn't it? And do you think there's any hard parts about playing baseball?
A lot.
Yeah? Like what?
The swing and what to swing at and catching the balls, especially being a first baseman. And
that all sounds pretty hard, huh?
And being in the outfield, you know.
Yeah. And how do you think they have to practice a lot, or just kind of not too much?
Practice a lot.
A lot.
Yeah.
Like more than most people, right?
Yeah.
To be really, really good at it.
Yeah.
See ya.
See ya. Bye.
Well, today we are going to talk to a professional baseball player. Our guest today is a World Series champion with a lifetime .282 batting average, 1,674 hits, and 299 home runs. He was 1993 AL Rookie of the Year, 1995 Silver Slugger, and 2015 inductee into the Angels Hall of Fame. He's considered one of the most prolific and beloved players in Angels history. Today, we're happy to have as our guest, Tim Kingfish Salmon. When you talk to a lot of young kids and they say, hey, what do you want to be when you grow up? I mean, how many of them say I want to be a professional basketball player, professional baseball player? Mm-hmm. And today is really focused on just helping parents navigate those conversations with their kids. Mm-hmm. And also for the kids to really get a good grasp and understanding of what they're saying when they say that, right? It's easy to say those words, but giving them a little bit of insight into what it actually entails to make that happen.
Yeah, that's a great question. We've talked in the past about some of the challenges there. I have the unique experience of not only have I done it, I know the road that lies ahead. And then I came back and I coached the kids at the amateur levels all the way up until high school. I know the challenges that are there, and I know the perceptions that are there. And there's a lot of navigating, from a coaching standpoint, just to get the kid to focus on what's in front of them. It's challenging in this day and age. I mean, there's so much, going back in our generation, we didn't have ESPN. We didn't have all this stuff that really made the big leagues look like it was right there within arm's reach. It seemed like it was kind of like, saying, hey, someday you're going to be able to land on the moon. I mean, it was like, whoa, it's so far out there in the distance that it really, I think, helps you focus on, taking care of business today, or, just enjoying the season you're playing right now. I don't think the coaching and even from the player standpoint, you had to navigate some of the distractions, let's call them, of getting ourselves too far ahead of the process here. So it's a real challenge today, and especially with the specialized aspect of things. Kids are going year round in whatever sport it is. I'm going to refer to a lot of baseball analogies, but it's the same for the other ones as well, for basketball, football, soccer. I mean, my daughter played girls softball, and, she was on that track for softball, and then she just shipped to soccer, and it was the same thing. And then it was volleyball. And it's like, it's just crazy how the specialized part of the sport has happened at such a young age for these kids. And it's honestly, for me, I'm saddened by it, because I think we build well-rounded kids and well-rounded citizens by learning all the different things you can learn from all the different sports. I mean, you're really, I've said it, you don't go to school and just learn math. You learn all the different subject matters, and it makes you well-rounded, and it makes you more productive in your later years. And I think that's the big thing for all parents, is to realize 99.9% of these kids we're talking about, they're going to be 5 years from now, 10 years from now, they're working 9 to 5, and they're raising families, they're going to school. The sports and everything that you built your life on all those years in the amateur ranks is going to come to an end for 99.9% of them. And so at the end of the day, when you look 10, 20, 30 years down the road, you want that child to have had a positive experience, and hopefully they've garnered the lessons which you can learn from all the different sports. I mean, again, I go back to baseball. It's like, you learn mental and physical toughness through playing football. You learn teamwork and agility through playing basketball. You learn conditioning through playing soccer. For me, I was a racquetball player. I learned good hand-eye coordination skills playing racquetball. If I would have just focused on baseball, yeah, there's aspects of my game that would have been developed just through the reps, the repetition of it. But right. So much of the time as a coach, I see these kids that play baseball year round, and they got terrible footwork. They're slow, they're clumsy, they're not as athletic. Well, because they're not on the soccer fields, or they're not, on the basketball courts learning agilities. And then, you get that kid and he's a great baseball player when things are going well for him. And then all of a sudden things don't go well for him, and he hasn't developed the physical and mental toughness of how do you pull yourself up by the bootstraps that you learn in football or something. So I do think there's a balance that has to be made, and I just don't know how you accomplish it today.
Well, we're going to get into as much of that as we can today. But before we do, I think a lot of people know Tim Salmon, the baseball player, Tim Salmon, the baseball analyst. I want to go all the way back and talk just about who you were, what you remember about your childhood, what you remember about being a kid, not necessarily baseball related, but just things that you were into outside of baseball, maybe how you were academically, how your parents raised you, just kind of set the stage for how how you grew up.
Well, for me, sports was a lifesaver. My parents divorced when I was 4. I bounced back and forth. I lived in a single parent home with my mom for many years. We moved around a lot. We moved so much. In 12 years of education, let's say, I went to 8 different schools. So
oh, wow.
I was the new kid on campus every year. And when you think about it, the 12 years of education, my last 4 years in high school was the longest I ever stayed in one place. So theoretically, my first 8 years of education, I was at a different school in a different city.
And can you talk about what did that do for you from a personality? I would imagine from a personality standpoint, you had to learn how to build relationships easily, build friendships all over again. Talk a little about that part.
Yeah, it was tough. I mean, it's tough being a latchkey kid. Your mom's working, you're coming home to an empty apartment. It's me and my brother. Fortunately, I had a brother. He was like my twin in the sense that we're both the same size and we can sharpen each other athletically, and always had somebody to play catch with or whatever. But he was 2 years younger than me. And so I did have that common thing in my life, my brother. And then, of course, my mom was genius in that she had us playing every sport that was possible. It was kind of like our after school babysitter. So, those things were the positives that came out of it. But without a doubt, I mean, anytime you go to a new situation, a new scenario, new school, you're trying to make new friends. But I always go back to every team I got on, whether it was football, any of the sports I played, and I played them all year round. Every team I came to, I was the new kid. Nobody knew anything about me. I might have been the starting shortstop last year on that team, in that city, but now I got to come and I got to compete against the Suns shortstop and reprove myself again. So It was difficult. I'm thankful that I didn't shy away from it, and my talent always shined, and I was able to prove myself. And I think that's the one thing sports did for me. It was a playing field that I could go out there and kind of earn my stripes, and then at the same time, develop relationships and friendships. And, I kind of got indoctrinated in the new communities faster because of the sports. But it's a challenge. And I do believe that where I'm at today, I mean, having to prove yourself day in and day out, most kids, they grow up in these healthy homes and they've just, it's one thing after another. And all of a sudden they go off to college or go to high school and it's like, wow, I'm competing against 5 other guys. How do I, oh my gosh, what's that about? I've been doing that since first grade.
Yeah,
So
right.
I think I was groomed for that aspect of competition. And then, of course, having a brother that was just as equally athletic, and we could
Tim,
sharpen
refresh my
each other.
memory. Was he old? Were you older or was he the older one?
So I was older. And so my brother, Mike, he ended up playing major college football and playing in the NFL a little bit. And we were both, anywhere we went, we were the most athletic kids in the school for the most part. And it was partly because the only thing we had were sports. I mean, I feel like in a way, like I compare myself to the Dominican athlete. They live in these rough environments and all they have are sticks and balls and they play baseball all day long. And my brother and I were kind of the same. It was like, we lived in apartment complexes. We always had a football or a baseball or a basketball in our hands. And we were always playing, doing that stuff together because we're always in a new situation. We didn't really have friends. So he and I were like friends. So those were lessons that maybe weren't fun at the time, as being a young kid, feeling like an outcast, or you didn't have the solid family at home, or you didn't live in the home. You're kind of transient. You're the new kid. But on the flip side, thank goodness I had sports and a brother and athleticism to kind of bridge those gaps.
So Tim, I'm an older brother as well. And I take a lot of credit for my brother's 5 years younger than me. And he made it a lot he played college baseball. I didn't make it past high school. I take a lot of credit for that because I say, him and I, just like you, right? We were competing, playing in the front yard, and he's trying to compete with somebody 5 years older than him, right?
Exactly.
So I felt like I gave him that advantage a little bit, but you just kind of threw that out the window because you're the older brother and you made it happen. So I guess that excuse that I've been relying on for the last 20 years is bogus after all, huh?
Yeah, well, and honestly, my brother, he was successful. He played in the NFL and he was the major five-star recruit. He had all the major schools coming after him for football, and he was the stud in high school. He was a stud at every level. I wasn't. I was that skinny, ruddy kid that, worked hard and, I made the teams and I was always a valuable player, but it wasn't until my body physically developed and grew when I got into the late years of high school and college that I really started separating. My brother separated from the beginning for the very same reasons. He's playing everything with me and my friends, and then he goes down and plays with the kids' age and he just runs all over them. So he did have that benefit and it did him well. I mean, and the other thing is there's the big component in all this is that there's some physical attributes that have to be there, right? I mean, I'm a physically big guy. My brother's a physically big guy. Those kinds of things matter in amateur sports. I mean, you can do things better than other people because you're bigger and stronger and faster. And so, we had a lot of things, going for us at that time.
Yeah. And then the last thing I want to touch on from a childhood standpoint, you mentioned, living with a single mother. Obviously today in youth sports, a lot of the talk is around the parents' involvement and almost over-involvement, the amount of chirping that's happening, in the bleachers during the game and the coaching from the sidelines. And what was your parents' involvement and how do you kind of compare it to what seems to be common today?
Well, there was no involvement, honestly, not till I got to high school at that point, but I lived with my mom up until high school and she's working every day. I had to ride my bike to practices, to games. I mean, and back then you played in the local little leagues or the local football. So even like in football, the coach, it seemed like I was always getting rides to practice or games from my coach. I think coaches did that a little bit back then. A la Bad News Bears, the customized van that goes around, picks up all the kids and takes them to practice. So it was a little bit different era for sure. But my mom, she's working every day. It was this was the late 70s and early 80s. You play until the streetlights come on. I mean, there was much more freedom to do things on your own. And there was no concern about doing things on your own. I mean, hey, I'd ride home from practice at 8:00 at night and there was no concerns about that. But I think part of that, the benefit that came out of that is that everything was self-driven. I wanted to do it, so I did it. And if I didn't want to ride my bike anymore, then I guess maybe I wasn't relying on a parent taking me to these practices or these games or these organized events. It was all self-driven. My mom was like, well, hey, baseball signups, okay, I'll pay the fee, I'll fill out the paperwork. But you guys got to figure out how to get to practices. I'm working all day long. So my brother and I embrace this, and we talk about it even today with our kids. It's like, exactly what you're saying. I mean, the kids are so reliant on their parents that you wonder where's the drive coming from? Is it an internal drive or is it a parental drive? And I remember by the time I got to high school and I was living with my dad was, I want to say, a workaholic. He grew up on a farm. All he knew was business and work, and he never played sports. And I can remember one time, I think it was my junior year, I came home from a bad football game, and I was, complaining about my performance and this and that wasn't going for me and this and that. And he said, well, he goes, when you've had enough of it, he goes, we can always go out and get a job. And he was dead serious. Right. He wasn't like, hey, when sports are done, okay, then we can start talking about the real world. And I just remember at that time going, oh, okay. No, I don't want a job. I want to keep playing. And, that was probably one of the best things he could have done. I mean, he wasn't pushing me towards sports. He said, hey, I understand sports and the value and the things you're learning, and I'll support it. But when you're done with it, we'll move on to the next thing. And my brother and I joke about that because our dad never pushed us in sports. I never played catch in the front yard with my dad. Never played catch in the front with my mom. And I think, honestly, by the time we made it to professional sports, they were excited in it, but they're kind of like, how did this happen? Because they weren't even aware of what was going on, really.
Well, I think you're hitting on something massive, which is this idea of being self-driven versus the concept you hear a lot where there may be parents out there that are trying to live out their own unfulfilled childhood fantasies, and just the sheer amount of pressure that places on their children. And it just kind of has this negative effect that either one gets to the point where the kid just isn't enjoying the sport anymore and decides that they don't want to play, or two, they're so overwhelmed by the pressure that they have that they're not able to perform when it's time. So I find it really fascinating that, while you might have had some challenges with your childhood, you almost found a way to turn it into a positive. So I would ask you, to that extent, how much of that self-drive contributed to your ability? I mean, I want to talk about the mental aspect, the physical, the emotional, but that self-drive, like how much did that factor into your ability to make it as far as you did?
It's everything. I mean, I coached high school up until last year for 15 years or since I retired. And I would tell the parents, I said, these kids are going to go as far as they want to go. I don't care how much you push them. At some point, the kid has to have that desire, because you got to cut the cord. And in my high school program, I was really trying to wean the parents away from the kids and get the kids on their own, because the ones that could play beyond high school had the talent to play. I mean, it's a cliff. They don't know what's coming. When you go to a college program, there's no more mommy and daddy ball. There's no more, handing Gatorades in the dugout. I mean, that was my big thing is, these kids play so much club ball that their parents are handing them lunch in the dugouts, and there's really no sense of separation in some of these club sports. And in my high school program, I nixed that stuff right away. It's like, look, you're here. We're adults. You want me to treat you like a man, then act like a man. We're not here. Mommy and daddy aren't here to, bring you your equipment because you weren't able to think of, remember in the morning to pack it, or, plan ahead and bring a snack for post after school. You're relying on your 17, 18-year-old kids, boys, men. You want to be treated like a man. I mean, that's what you're demanding. Well, then act like it. Come prepared and put your mom and dad in the stands where they belong. Let them cheer for you. But we're out here, and you're going to respect the coaches that are out here putting the time in, and your teammates. We're going to play. We're going to learn to do things the right way, because if you have the talent to play at the next level, there is absolutely no tolerance for that at any level of the next level. At some point, you've got to be weaned away from that. I can't tell you how many times, and I didn't coach at like a 5A high school, top of the tier level. I coached at a 2 to 3A, middle of the pack, but private school stuff. And we always had good talent, and we had kids that could go on and play. And the biggest obstacle for all those kids is coming out of this cocooned environment where mom and dad have been with them every step along the way. They've signed them up for every camp, every coaching thing. They're to take them to lunch after the fact. They're there to take, it's like mom and dad have been along for the process the entire way. And then they go off to college ball, and for the first time, they're on their own. It's been a rare situation where those kids that I'm talking about actually went away and weren't shell-shocked. I mean, most of them they come back and talk to me maybe, or I've had on a handful of occasions, a few of them call me that first fall semester, literally just wide-eyed, like, what is going on here, coach? And I got to walk them through that. Hey, that's what I've been trying to prepare you for. Listen, it's time to be a man. It's time you're on your own. You're competing against 3 other kids out there that they want to eat your lunch, and it's not all this shiny, smooth cocooned environment. It's really what you have in here now. You have it. you've got to go out there and make it happen. So it's a real deal. And I think it's important for parents to realize there will be a day of reckoning where your kid, it's got to be in here and it's on his own. You might as well start preparing them for it. Hopefully by the time they start entering high school.
Dave, you're kind of, this is jogging a lot of memories for me. I was very fortunate. My parents did a lot for me. I also went to a private high school. And I got to college, not to play ball, just, academically, living in my first apartment by myself and thinking, man, I have free reign to do anything and anything I want. Fast forward end of the first semester and I'm on academic discipline and in danger of being kicked out of the university. And I'm like, ooh, yeah, this is, I don't have my mom telling me to finish my homework and all that sort. So many people have that wake up call. I guess it's just a matter of when you have it. For me, it was 19 years old. For others, it might be earlier. For others, it might be later. But I see the importance of that and how that contributes to the mental aspect of the game. With that being said, I do want to touch on the physical aspect of the game because you mentioned that briefly early on. And I did do a little bit of research because I was curious to see, what is the average height of an MLB player? What's the average weight? And, does that give you any sort of advantage? And what I found out was that the average height of an MLB player is 6'2", 209 pounds. So for those of you listening at home, think someone like Nolan Arenado, Bryce Harper, or even yourself. I see you listed at 6'3", 200 pounds. In your
no.
Right there. No?
I haven't been 200 pounds since my freshman year in high school.
This is your playing day. Oh, is that right? Okay, well then they got it wrong. But anyways, the point is, there's the Jose Altuves of the world. And, this is, we're talking averages. So there's the whole distribution on the left side, on the right side, but on average, that's it. And you did touch on it earlier where you said, hey, look, physical attributes absolutely play a role. And based on the statistics I just shared, that's absolutely true. From that perspective, how much, if you think about, if I'm putting together my ideal baseball player, there's the mental, the emotional, the physical aspect. What percentage of is physical related? Like you really need to be this big to have a better shot.
Well, I would say the physical part of it, 90% of that is what gets you noticed, because every scout, every coach out there, he's looking at what's the player's ceiling. David Eckstein, he hit his ceiling probably his sophomore year in high school, and everybody kind of said, oh, he's one of those good kids. He's going to make a great coach someday because he knows the game. And he just kept finding himself, by a little bit of luck of life and the way things worked, he kept finding himself in situations that gave him opportunity, and he came through. But that's a very rare situation. I mean, Altuve's kind of the same thing. I always say, I go back to years ago when I first retired, I'm getting into the game, and I was with our minor league director, and we walked out to the minor league. It was during spring training. We walked out to the minor league field, and it was at this one point of practice where the entire minor leagues were on one field. So we're talking 120 guys on one field. And we stood back, and he says, he goes, I want you to look across all these bodies out here. What bodies, who stands out as a major leaguer? And it's amazing. I mean, the vast majority of those players all were, players 6 foot or smaller, and they didn't really stand out. And then all of a sudden you see a couple big boys, pitchers, 6'5" guys. So those guys stand out. And honestly, those were the prospects. All the other guys were fillers. And when I say fillers, I mean, hey, every team has 10 prospects that they're like, these are our future of this organization. But guess what? I need 110 other players, we call them roster fillers, to create these teams and these environments for my 10 prospects to play in. And that's the dark reality of anything professionally in baseball, is that just because you're playing pro baseball in the minor leagues, you technically have an opportunity. But the reality is all the organization's efforts and focus is on those prospects. And yes, there might be some fringe guys that might develop and get the attention, and super. Hey, you run into those guys. But the vast majority of what's going on out there, hey, you're a roster filler. We're going to give you a chance to play in the minor leagues for 1, 2, maybe 3 years at most. And because there's another wave, there's players coming in every year. And the reality is that every one of those minor league guys out there, when I looked at that sea of 120 players, every single one of them had this: college All-American, high school All-American, best player on every team they ever played on, Dominican superstar. They were all the best at whatever they did growing up in life. And now out there amongst the sea of other players, now they're just average roster fillers at the end of the day. And the guys that stood out had some physical attribute. Even if the guy was 6 foot, hey, he throws 98. Hey, the guy's 6 foot, maybe he's 5'11", but he runs he can steal 60 bags for you. I mean, the guys that were not in that physical specimen side, they had some unique other deal going on. And again, it may not be a physical thing that you see, big, fit, muscular, whatever, but it was a physical in the sense that he had an electric arm or he had legs that he can run.
Fast twitch. Yeah.
Yeah. Fast twitch something. So I say that in the sense that these kids, I've only had one or two kids in my whole high school deal where I saw them as freshmen and I saw their development and said, physically, this kid has the ability to really climb the ladder. And one of them's actually in Double A with the Dodgers, and we're going to hear his name in the next couple of years. So, awesome. But that's of all the kids I've ever coached. And I've coached a lot of great club kids and a lot of great players that might be able to play junior college ball in the right situation. They're all fantastic high school athletes. But at the end of the day, these kids playing a little fishbowl, and all they see are their peers. And what they don't know is what's out there. And the world is gigantic out there. I mean, there are so many amazing athletes. So the physical thing is huge. It is a huge deal. And it never became more real to me than when my minor league director that day said, of all these 120 All-Americans out here, how many of them stand out and look like major leaguers? And he was right. There was maybe a dozen that physically stood out.
That's really interesting is that I like what you said, that early on, the physical attributes are what gets you noticed 90% of the time. But so then I'm curious, okay, you've gotten that far, you've gotten noticed. But now does that take a back seat? Because now everyone's at the same physical attributes, more or less. Then to what extent does the emotional or mental side of the game, does that completely take over after that point? Or does the physical ability, obviously it has to still be there, whether it's like you said, you could throw faster than everybody, run faster than everybody, but does it kind of shift as far as what becomes important after that?
Well, it totally does. And it's interesting because like when like I said, I was 6'3", 180 pounds out of high school. And then I gradually started gaining weight. By the time I graduated college, I was only 215, but I was lean. And I had a scout would say, oh, he's a 5 tool. He hits for average, hits for power. He can run, he can play defense, and he can, he's got all those attributes. But I was very rough, but they're projecting me. They're saying, hey, he's got the physical size. He's going to fill out. He's going to get his man strength. He's going to grow in the game. He's going to learn and understand it. He's going to, but there's no guarantee of that success. So you try to draft as many of those kind of players as you can, and then you throw them out there. And my first year in pro ball, I remember when I got drafted, and I go to the mini camp before they send you off to our 8-ball team, and I'm standing out there with 3 other right fielders, and one of them was an American guy, 2 other guys were Dominican, and I'm looking at them, and this one Dominican was 6'6", and he had a cannon of an arm. The other Dominican was 6'2", he could fly, and the other American kid, he didn't really have the physical outfield attributes, but boy, he could hit bombs. And you're looking at immediately you go, oh my gosh, this is it. I'm where do I stand in this group here? It's like, and I was the guy that I kind of had all the tools where these guys might have had 2 or 3, and this guy had 2 or 3, and that guy had 2 or 3. But for the first time in my life, I was standing in an outfield where I wasn't by far the best person. And that kind of hit me like, oh, that's what pro ball's about. Now you're starting to see, okay, we all kind of have the same physical attributes. Maybe, some haven't developed quite yet, but now it's going to be what happens up here, who develops. And I'm telling you what, pro ball is the difference between AAA and the major leagues. The difference between the major leaguer that gets a cup of coffee and the one that stays. The difference between the one that stays and the one that becomes a superstar. It's not physical most of the time. There is sometimes. It's mental. I mean, it is who can handle the day-to-day grind, who can figure out the cat and mouse game that's going on, who has that light bulb moment when the game just clicks. That's all mental. It's all mental. And that's the big differential right there going forward.
And so once they're there, what percentage of those players would you say had that mental aspect of the game? Is that where it starts to weed out and get to the cream of the crop? Or were you still like, oh man, 50% of the guys get the mental side and now I got to figure out something else?
It's way less than that because I can't tell you how many guys had all these physical tools and they never figured it out. I mean, I can't tell you how many guys I played in the minor leagues where that kid physically had more talent than I did. Why did I make it and he didn't? I mean, you see that all the time in the game. Why does look at Max Muncy for the Dodgers?
Right.
Came up with the A's, kind of flushed out, really wasn't anything. All of a sudden the light bulb clicks later in his career. Look who he is. Look at his physically. I mean, is he better than, some of these other players that haven't figured it out? No. I mean, the reality is that he got to a level and then mentally it clicked. And that's the difference maker. Why do some major leaguers make it and some don't? I mean, I've been doing the Angels for 15 years on TV. I've seen so many prospects come up through our system, and we come up with all this great excitement, and they last for maybe a year, maybe half a year, and then they pan out, and it's like, well, what happened? It's like, well, because after the excitement of getting to the big leagues wore out, and after the league. Because the league's amazing. They're going to figure out
reports, all that. Yep.
Yeah, they're going to figure out your deficiencies. They're going to find your weak spots, and that's when the mental side comes in. Am I able to stay a step ahead? Am I able to make adjustments? Am I able to kind of process this all at the same time? I'm failing all the time, and I got 40,000 people in the stands, and people are booing me, and then I got the pressures of all. Can I handle all these things? This hurricane of all these things. That's mental. And some guys can and some guys can't. And honestly, for the A-Rods that are out there that are unique, or the Jeters and all that, how many guys like that never even got a chance to, play because they could, or get there because they couldn't handle one aspect of what we're talking about?
All right. The last component that I can think of that we had mentioned in a different conversation we had was there's also so let's say you've got the physical attributes, you've got the mental side of the game figured out. How much does luck play into it as well?
Oh, it's a ton. Okay. I'll give you an example. So when I was with the Angels in '92, I was in AAA. I went to the AAA All-Star game. This is a little quick story. And at the AAA All-Star game, and I think it was in Virginia somewhere. I can't remember. On our squad, Bernie Williams was another outfielder. JT Snow was on that team. And there was a couple other players. Eric Wedge was our catcher, I believe. He became a manager years later. But Bernie Williams was my catch partner at the time. And he'd been up and down on the yo-yo with the Yankees at the time. Because the Yankees back then was a very veteran club. They didn't, Steinbrenner didn't want young kids up. But Bernie would kind of yo-yo up and down. But he wasn't really given opportunities to go out there and play successfully. And then JT Snow on the other side was the first baseman, college, maybe All-American. I mean, he was a stud, but guess who was in front of him? Don Mattingly. These two guys were in the Yankees organization, and I remember talking to them. They're going, you are so lucky to be where you're at, because the Angels are going to rebuild, and they're going to give all you young kids a chance. The Yankees, we're stuck. We're never, I would change shoes with you in a heartbeat, blah, 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 blah. Well, that winter, I got called up, and those guys did too at some point in September or whatever, but the writing wasn't really there for them to stick. Well, that winter, Angels committed to youth. I knew I was starting right fielder next year. Fortunately for JT Snow, he got traded to the Angels. And so he was part of the young group. So he got out of jail. He's stuck behind Don Mattingly. All of a sudden, now he has a chance to play with us. And then for Bernie Williams, thankfully, that was then the whole George Steinbrenner got suspended by the league and blah, blah, blah. And so they just went hands off, and they said, okay, bring up the young kids, and they let Bernie play. Fast forward 20 years later, I'm with Bernie, and I'm watching a Yankeeography about this amazing player, Bernie Williams, and all the World Series rings he has. And every time I see him, I'm like, hey, you still want to switch shoes with me?
Yeah.
And he's like, no. I like the career I've had. But again, that's how much luck plays into it. And I always say this, Derek Jeter's the most amazing ball player. There's so many reasons to like him. But is Derek Jeter if he comes up in Kansas City or Minnesota or somewhere else that's not in the, he was amazing because he handled he played and he handled the limelight where he was, and it made him amazing. But do we know Derek Jeter the way he is if he comes up in Kansas City? And that's kind of the same thing as Tom Brady if he doesn't come up in New England. Right. So in all sports, there's a little bit of luck. There was tremendous luck that I was drafted by the Angels, and I came up at the right time when they wanted to rebuild, and they went all young. When the Angels were really playing well in the 2000s to 2010s, they were winning every year. We had prospects coming up, and they weren't given the freedom to fail. It was like, you're playing twice a week, you better be successful. If you're not, you're going back to the minor leagues because we're here to win. Yeah. See, if I would have come up in that environment, maybe I wouldn't have developed. I came up in an environment that was like, we can lose every game, kind of like the Angels this year. Let the young kids play.
Yeah.
And that is total luck. not every situation is like that. And, you look across the board, how many players that come up in those environments where they have to win are really given enough rope to go out there and learn how to play the game.
Yeah.
And so many of them end up not having careers.
That's interesting. And also when I think of luck and you think of the game today is injuries, right?
Yeah.
You got to be lucky to not be, let's say, a pitcher that has Tommy John surgery and isn't able to come. I mean, so it's luck of the organization and the position that you're in. And then injuries plays a huge part of that too, right? I mean, there's nothing you can do about it, but it is what it is.
It is what it is. I mean, you're going to go out there and grind it and get everything they get. I mean, how does Cal Ripken play that many years without injuries? I mean, that was kind of that. He's the gold standard. You're not going to see that anymore. But the reality is there's so many variables. And that's why I come back to the very opening comment. When I would talk to my high school parents, I'm like, I know you love your child and you think he's going to be the next A-Rod, the next Jeter, the next Mike Trout, the next Aaron Judge. You really don't know what you're talking about here. You don't know what you're saying or what your dreams are. It's great to have dreams, but there is so much that has to happen between now and then. Enjoy where you're at right now. Let your kid play. It's one thing to dream. Don't put those kinds of pressures on them though, because even the Aaron Judges and the A-Rods, they're even with the talent that they had, there were so many things that had to line up and the roads they went down, happened to play out. And I'm not saying don't chase your dreams. I'm just saying have a healthy perspective of where you're at today and don't let your kid miss out the opportunity to get everything he can out of today. And really it's the enjoyment. The fun of camaraderie, playing with your teammates, things of that nature. Hey, take your kid home after the game and go get ice cream or, go to McDonald's afterwards. I mean, have the kids grinded for 3 hours or 6 hours playing the game. That ride home needs to be talking about something other than the game. Listen, he's got enough peer pressure. He's got enough internal pressures going on. He doesn't need to hear from mom and dad about what's been going on and how they could have done better. If the kid wants to offer it, you be a sounding board and be a very positive sounding board and say, hey, okay, well, what's your game plan? What do you think you need to do? I mean, but at the end of the day, bring those conversations back to healthiness and give him a break. Because even as a major leaguer, the best coach I ever had was my wife. Because every time I came home from the game, I could diffuse whatever it was on her, and she brought me back to reality and helped me just, separate what was going on and the pressures. So we all need that at every level. That's part of being a healthy athlete at any level, whatever that looks like.
All right. So we're into this conversation. If Tim hasn't scared you away from wanting to be a big leaguer yet, let's talk about for those
Chase
that are
your
still
dreams.
sticking around.
Do it healthy though.
for those of you that are still sticking around, again, I'll go back to what we said earlier, which is when a kid says, hey, dad, I want to be a big leaguer when I grow up. I think a normal response is, okay, son, well, you're going to have to work hard. Right. Since we're talking to a big leaguer, let's give a little context to just what working hard means. So for those of you that there, because you think about, okay, well, I'm gonna go to practice. Every time I go to practice, I'm gonna play hard. But there's a lot more. So if you could give us a peek under the hood, what does working hard actually mean when you're working your way up to the majors?
First of all, the higher you climb the ladder, there's always somebody out there outworking you. Let's just be honest. I mean, to me, I'd always challenge my kids. You think you're doing enough to be good or be great? There's always somebody out there. You're going to run across this guy that's outworked you. So you have to have that as a mindset to begin with, that there's the idea of complacency is in all of us. And you've got to fight that every day. It's being complacent, thinking, oh, this is enough. It's never enough. Okay. But there's a healthy balance for sure in all this. Working hard to me is not so much, let's just take an example. I don't need to go down to the tee, in the batting cages and hit off the tee 500 swings a day. Okay. Because out of those 500 swings, you might give me 100 quality swings. You might give me 100 with the mindset and the right frame of mind. To me, I'd much rather have 20 swings where you're completely in the right frame of mind. You're focused on what you're doing. You're not up there freely swinging and trying to hit home runs. You're taking that learning aid and applying it to your game in a way that's going to really make a difference in what you're doing. So it's practicing with a purpose. It's not just out there mindfully swinging. I always tell my kids, I said, we go through stations. You got 20 swings to work on the high ball tee drill, 20 swings a day to do that. Okay, you add that up over the end of the week, that's 100 swings off the high ball. Now you do that over the next month, that's 400 swings. And then over the end of the season, that's 3 months, that's 1,200 swings. And hopefully by the time we get to the state playoffs and that kid in that game on the line situation throws you that high ball, you're able to execute the swing to hit that ball. But guess what? Only if you put in the 1,500 swings in the right frame of mind to be there in that moment to be successful. The easier one is bunting. Everybody just blows through, 5 bunts a day, 2 right side, 2 left side. Okay, working the drag, working the squeeze. And I see it every day. The kids are in there screwing around, talking, they're laughing, they're giggling. Okay, they're just going through the motions. And I said, here's the deal, guys. I said, you don't know at one point in the season, you're going to be called on to execute that bunt when the game's on the line. And I said, everybody here, your peers, but most of all, you know when that moment comes, you're going to be, oh crap, am I ready for this moment? And if you've done your work, whether you get the bunt down or not, if you've done your work, your peers and you will know, hey, I did everything I could to be ready for that moment. But let me tell you what, you can't fool your teammates and you can't fool yourself. If you get to that moment in the state championship game and that moment comes, the pressure, and you're going to be scared out of your boots because like, oh crap, here it is. And you didn't put the work in.
I was not prepared. Right.
I was not prepared. So when I say work hard, everybody works hard. I mean, there's so much eyewash out there. Guys are hitting for hours. Guys got blisters. It's like, great. You hit for 2 hours. You got blisters. Were you working on the right things? You're hitting off the sliders? Were you trying to pull every one of them? Or are you working at keeping your hands inside and hitting it the other way and doing the things that are going to equate to your success in the game? So it's not so much what you're doing, it's how you're doing and the purpose behind it. Are you committed to that? And are you getting everything you can? Or are you wasting those opportunities? Because those opportunities that you waste, they start adding up over the course of a season, over the course of a year, over the course of years of development. And then you wake up one day and now you're competing against that kid for a starting job in college or in pro ball. And guess what? You didn't work on the same things that kid did. And that's why that kid's going to come out ahead.
So quality over quantity.
Yeah.
All right. So they've worked hard. They've done quality over quantity. They've done the repetitions. They're best prepared. They're in the big leagues. We all know the glamour side of that, right? Which is the games and, interviews and being in front of the media and signing autographs and all that stuff. But again, if you could give us just a look behind the curtain, what does a normal day look like? Let's say from the time you leave your house in the morning or afternoon until the time that's you leading up to first pitch. What does that look like?
Well, I'll go back to, because we play every night. It's the night before. Okay, so you play your game the night before. You're driving home and you're already thinking about who's the starting pitcher tomorrow night. Because in the major leagues, I'm going to go home. My dreams all night long are going to be about facing that guy. It's just the reality. I mean, you're so like this during the course of the season. You're in it, and you're always focused on the next game. And so there's a little bit of downtime driving home. You're trying to, you might come home and you might talk through the game you just played, but it's at some point it's like, okay, turn the page tomorrow. And that's the biggest thing in the big leagues. Can you turn the page and go to tomorrow? Can you have a bad outing and turn the page and be ready for the next outing or the next at bat or the next pitch? And that's probably one of the biggest keys is the big leaguer that has success has the ability to turn the page on the previous performance, good or bad. Because you could have hit a home run your last at bat and then go up there overconfident and strike out when the game counted on you. The game's on the line. So the reality is can I turn the page of what just happened and be ready for the next whatever's in front of me? Now, going back to preparation. Yeah, I go home at some point. I'm starting to think about, hey, I'm facing Pedro Martinez tomorrow. So I'm going through the archives. How have I faced him? What does he throw to me? Okay. What's my game plan going to be? Okay. I have my morning routine at home. I got to get to the ballpark at 2:00. Okay, so I got to leave at 1:30. So you're already kind of starting to schedule out your day. And then my drive to the ballpark, I'm thinking about, okay, I need to get this treatment in, that treatment in. Okay, but what's my work? I got to, I have some pregame cage work to do. Okay, what's my routine going to be today? How's it going to vary? Okay, well, hey, Pedro really, he likes to throw that fastball inside. And, okay, maybe I got to work on pulling my hands. Okay, so I know I need some extra time in the cage to work on that. Or, you know what, hey, he likes to throw that big hanging curveball. I need to get off the machine and see some of the big hanging curveball. So you're already starting to plan that. And then so that when I park my car and I'm walking into the stadium, it's like blinders are on. For me, I was called Timmy Land. I mean, I used to get teased because I would come and I'd walk right by guys because it's like boom, 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 boom. It's like this is my routine. I got to get these things done to get ready for batting practice in the game. And then, hey, I got to get in. I got to watch 10 minutes of Pedro's last 2 starts. What's working for him, what's not. We didn't have scouting like they have today, so we had to do a lot of our own scouting. So again, that's where the whole mental makeup of who you are. Are you the kind of person that's going to, check, dot all your I's and cross all your T's? Are you going to, or do you need some coach telling you, hey, here's what you need to do. Here's what you need. Are you that player that can come in and I know what it takes for me to get ready to play? Because at the end of the day, it falls on me. I can't, if I suck, I can't be blaming it on my hitting coach or that guy. I'm responsible for it at the end of the day. And so that's where all my prep was going into that night's game. And my goal was, by the time the game started, I had all the details worked out. I knew what my approaches were going to be, my game plan at the plate, all that kind of stuff, so that when I got in the box, it was like, boom, been here, done that, visualized this all night long. I visualized these at bats. I know what the scenarios, the situation is. And now I'm just kind of going into auto drive and I'm reacting to the little game within the game. Oh, he threw that pitch. Oh, maybe he's going to try to do that. Okay, how do I respond to that? And so now I'm ready to be competitive mentally rather than just being, going in there, see the ball, hit the ball. I mean, Some people respond, I just saw it. Well, they're being coy with you. They don't want to tell you, they don't want to reveal their strategies. Or if the guys that truly do say that are the guys that hit 210, 220 all year long. So the superstars, you watch A-Rod, you watch, Jeter, you watch Big Papi talk on the post-game shows right now, get into their heads. Every moment of their strategy was being figured out. They were constantly playing the cat and mouse and the strategicness of the game. And that's where the success at the major leagues really happens, is when it becomes that mental chess match. Because the talent is kind of all the same. It's those guys that can play the mental game are the ones that separate themselves.
So, Tim, you're telling me, I just had a grind, from high school through college, and I had to beat out 2,000 other high school kids, and there had to be some luck on my side. And I get to the big leagues, and you're telling me I still got to grind every single day. That sounds pretty tough.
It's grinding. 2002 Angels, we were blue collar. We grinded every day. All the superstars, let me tell you what, with the exception of maybe Ken Griffey Jr. and maybe with Mike Trout, these guys have these big smiles and they go out there and they play the game like they're in Little League. I know there's some genius going on behind the scenes, but they might truly be relying on a little bit more childlike, just they're out there to play. Right. Everybody else I've ever met, it was a grind, and everybody was just, I've met more superstars in this game that were so insecure about their game that you would be shocked to hear the names talk about. And they're, oh my gosh, I suck. I'll never do this. I never do that. I'm like, dude, you're a Hall of Famer. It's like, because that's the reality at the highest level. It grinds at you. It beats at you. You're so finitely aware of the difference between my success and my ultimate failure. And you're constantly walking that razor thin line. That's professional sports. And I would garner say it's probably at any level of any other sport too.
Well, that's, just incredible insights. And I think, just to tie a bow on this, the reality is everybody pursue your dream to the extent that you want to pursue it. It's a long and bumpy road. It's possible, but it's a long and bumpy road. And I think my biggest takeaway from today was just, I keep going back to what you said about becoming self-dependent and, how sports can be a vehicle for creating that. And then, the reality is most of us are not going to become big league players, but we can learn a lot of skills that can make us successful at a lot of other types of careers. So I guess just to tie it up, what advice do you have for the parents and even the kids that are listening to this out there? Forget the professional baseball side of things for a moment, and just how do they take full advantage of what youth sports has to offer?
Youth sports, it's really a great parallel to life. Baseball is a great parallel to life. Nothing comes easy. There's no shortcuts to success. You have to work, you have to grind. There's always somebody out there you're going to be competing against. I tell my kids that. You go in for an interview, you're not the only one interviewing. There's 20 other people they're interviewing. So how do you separate yourself? And you separate yourself by being balanced. I'd say with sports, be cautious of putting all your eggs in one basket. It was great. I mean, coming up to the minor leagues and grind, I always had a plan B. I always knew that, hey, if this doesn't work out, I had a 5-year game plan. I got married. I'm going to have a family, I have kids. I'm going to go do this. I always had kind of a plan B. And quite honestly, that helped me relax a little bit, It didn't, the kids that put all their marbles, one bag. I mean, that just seems like that would be a difficult way of going about it. You'd be just grinding on every failure. Baseball is just a game of failure. 70% you're failing, right? So there's so much failure in sports. I would say it's balance. There's so many great attributes that come out of any sport you play in that are going to make you successful in life. I mean, even in your own business. I mean, when you're hiring people, you love hiring people that play team sports because business is about teams. It's about, can you work with people? Can you learn to carry the lead at times? Can you learn to fall in place and be a good, soldier here and there? I mean, there's so many great things you can learn. Tenacity, grit, perseverance, teamwork, all these things come in sports. So yes, encourage your kid to play, encourage your kid to be the best teammate he can to the guys around him. If he's a leader, leaders in anything in life, we all want leaders. Well, this is sports at these levels develop great leaders. I mean, learn how to bring the people up around you up to your level. Because at some point, somebody's going to come along and see that in you, and they're going to say, you know what, you'd be perfect for this situation. So being successful in life is what our goal should be. And sports is a tremendous foundation platform for all that. Now, if it happens in a unique situation to be that you get to play that sport, super. The reality is, I hate to say it, for most of us, it's not. But it can be successful in something else. And so it's okay. Chase those dreams, learn what you can from them, do what you can from them, but recognize that it's not all for naught if you don't make it in that sport. It can translate into something else in life. And at the end of the day, I would say, I'm here as a coach. I'm here to make good citizens. I want to make the best. I want all my teammate players to be good citizens in this world and go out there and do great things and achieve all the dreams they want, if it's not in the sport they're playing.
Tim, awesome stuff. I had a lot of fun. I appreciate you taking the time. And hopefully we get to talk again soon. Yeah,
this is great. It's been fun. I don't have my high school kids to talk to anymore. So it's like, oh yeah, this gets me excited to talk about, things and, really making people better. So I appreciate it.
Thanks, Tim.
Thanks, Paul.